Hello everyone and welcome to my first ever YouTube video. So in this video I'm going to be discussing with you guys how to customize VS Code both from a UI side of things, so how to make it look nice and minimalistic, and also functionality wise, so how to make it work as best as it can for you and your own personal preferences. So first things first, I'm just going to go through my current setup, kind of explain how things work and what I like about it. So the first major thing that you can see is that it looks a lot different from your typical VS Code setup, and this is because, for example, the activity bar is all the way down there on the side, on the bottom side, and the font that's used for the file explorer is the same as the editor. It's also throughout basically the entire application, so it's also for the tab bar. And there is no title bar as well. It's a really minimalistic kind of setup. There isn't many buttons that you usually see with VS Code around. And this is because I use a different combination of extensions that really give me a lot of power to customize VS Code just how I like it and just how well it works for me. So one of the main things that I have in terms of functionality is that I actually have integrated Neovim into my VS Code. So I can go up and down with JK. I can do all sorts of Vim key bindings as normal. But in addition, I can also do stuff like Control H to go to my file explorer, and I can also navigate it using J and K. I can create a new file using A, can create a new folder using command capital A. I can rename a file using R, and I can delete it using D. I don't need to ever lay my hand on the mouse to actually navigate through my entire file system. And another thing that I do also have is if I do press space in normal mode, then this kind of catalog of custom key bindings shows up, and I can actually invoke any of them. So for example, if I do SF, that brings up my file basically search, and if I do space FF, that's the find and replace. So generally I don't actually need to use the mouse at all with this setup. Another thing is, if you know Next.js, you know there it's typically more files that comes in a Next.js project than what you actually kind of see now. And this is because I have an extension that actually toggles on and off some certain files and hides them from my file explorer. So if I do Command Shift A, that actually brings all of the files that are in the project to view. And one of these obviously is next config.js. So if I do Command Shift A again, that gets toggled back and it's hidden. So I typically only have my actual source code where I spend most of my time in there, and if I ever need to change something in the config files, then I trigger this key binding and I change it, and then go back to kind of the more minimalistic look in the file system. So I'm gonna go through some of the extensions that I use and what actually allows me to do these sorts of things. And I'll firstly start with APC. So APC is an extension that allows you to customize VS Code much more than actually VS Code allows you to do by default. It could be, for example, supplying your own custom CSS, so you can do whatever really, putting the activity bar, for example, on the bottom left side, like how I have it. General these sorts of things, and this is basically what allows me to have that minimalistic look throughout my my editor. Another extension is toggle excluded files. This is what enables me to exclude and kind of hide and unhide these sorts of files like config files and node modules and all of that stuff. I also do use Neovim, as I said, so I'm using the actual Neovim integration, not the emulation. And the commands catalog that you see here, this is WitchKey, which is actually ported from the WitchKey plugin for the Neovim ecosystem. I'm going to go through now the settings.json file and kind of just go through it line by line, explaining how things work. So I have my settings editor to JSON. This basically allows you so that every time that you do press command comma, it will actually open up the settings.json file and not the UI of VS Code to change your settings, because I much prefer that. My current theme is Aura Dark, and my current icon theme is Moxer Icons. I think this is a really good looking combination, especially with Geist Mono as my font. And I do use Geist Mono everywhere except the terminal, where I use JetBrains Mono nerd font variant. And that's because the JetBrains Mono nerd font actually supplies icons to the terminal, which I do need, for example, for the ls command here, as you can see, which Geist Mono, there isn't a nerd font variant yet. There is a PR out there, but it's not in a part of nerd font yet. I like typically size 14 for my editor and terminal, and I like to hide a lot of stuff. So I hide the minimap, I hide the command center, and I set my scroll bars to auto so that they actually only show up when I start scrolling. And I do set the title bar style to custom instead of the native one, so that the title bar actually doesn't look like the native macOS one, which I don't think that goes well with VS Code. On to next is the APC settings. So I'm positioning the activity bar bottom side, and I'm setting the size to 28, and then I'm hiding the title bar, and I'm setting the font family throughout VS Code to Geist Mono. This is what enables Geist Mono to be used for the file explorer, for example. As for the status bar, so I'm setting the position to editor bottom, which basically lets it only take the space of the editor and not the entire full width. So that basically lets it share its space with the activity bar. And I set the height of it to 28, which is the same size as the activity bar, hence they're basically on the same line. I then do some custom CSS to hide some stuff. So I'm hiding, for example, the title label from the repository. I'm hiding some editor actions just to kind of make it more minimalistic generally. And after that, I do some customizations for my theme. And so basically what I like to have is for all of the panels around VS Code to have the same background color and only use border colors to be the separator between panels. I think that looks a lot more cohesive to my personal eye, and this is basically what I'm doing here. So I'm just setting all of the panels that have different background colors to have the same background color as the file explorer. And then after that, I'm putting the files exclude list. As you can see here, there is like a lot of files that typically you wouldn't really do in the exclude, but because I am using the toggle exclude files extension, I can just have them in my file exclude and on the fly just toggle them on and off using the key binding. After that, just some miscellaneous stuff. So for example, I completed disable startup editor. I don't really want to see any welcome pages or any of that. I also personally don't like compact folders, and I set my default tab size to 2. And after that, just kind of noting, there is a lot of extensions that you might already be using that actually their functionality is already baked into VS Code as of recent. So one of these, for example, is auto renaming tags, and you can actually enable that using just editor.linked editing and set it to true. So this basically will let you rename the tags even in GSX, basically without renaming both opening and closing tags. And then I typically don't like to see the file path in my breadcrumbs. I typically just know what file I'm on, so for me it doesn't actually provide me any more information to know the file path, and so I just turn that off. I then just let VS Code trim the trailing white spaces, and I enable bracket pair colorization and indent guides. These are again functionalities that you might already be using extensions for, and you actually don't need these extensions because it is baked into VS Code. And after that, I set my zoom level to 0.75. I think for me it's perfect personally, but that's just personal preference. But yeah, that's pretty much it around my configurations. It's actually not much. If you are not interested in the Neovim side of things in terms of the Neovim integration to VS Code, then that's pretty much the configuration. It's actually pretty small. But if you are interested about Neovim, this is where it starts basically, and until the end of the file it's just Neovim and which key configuration. So first things first, I let the Neovim extension know where my actual Neovim instance is on my system, and I provide it with a path to a custom Vim script that it will actually use as a configuration. I'll go through that now. So this might feel a bit daunting, but basically I took this file from LunarVim. So they had a commit, I think about 3 years ago, that completely deleted these files, and basically LunarVim had VS Code type of configuration shipped with it, so you can actually integrate kind of LunarVim into it. and I just simply copied what they had there in these files, and it works amazingly well, honestly. So I literally just copied this file, and the only thing I've added is the clipboard unnamed plus, so that I can yank, for example, and it would go to my global clipboard instead of the Neovim one. So that's my init.vim, and after that I set Neovim to run in its own process, so that makes it a bit more performant. And literally from that point on to the end of the file, it's all just which key configuration. So I'm basically defining a lot of the commands that you see here. For example, I have space W that would save it, and then space Q that would close the file. For example, if I press the space semicolon, it opens up the VS Code panel to run different scripts. Generally stuff like that, and this is also copied from that same commit that deleted these configurations. You have here the keybindings.json, which I'll go through after, but after that you have all of the which key bindings basically that I have in my current setup. And last but not least is the keybindings.json. So same thing, I basically copied that from LunarVim, and it allows you to basically set a lot of different key bindings that actually work with Neovim, because you can use the when condition. So for example, this is what allows me to do Control H to go to the file explorer from the editor, and then Control L from the file explorer to the editor. The only thing I've added basically from that configuration is to just include also JJ and JK to go into normal mode from insert mode. So I'm now in insert mode, and I can do JK, and I'm back into normal mode now. That's literally the only difference basically, and that's pretty much it. For me personally, it's the best VS Code setup I've had. I think it works really well for me, and it just makes me more productive, and more than that, it just makes me more excited to do coding, because it looks freaking amazing. So yeah, I hope you guys liked this video. This was my first video, probably not going to be the best quality that you have watched. Nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and yeah, peace out.